Welcome to MBA 6601, which is the course called International Business. This is the PowerPoint lecture beginning Unit 2 and Chapter 2. In this presentation, I want to cover material from the book from Chapter 2 and also some material that's in the news from your country. I am Dr. Bruton, and it's my pleasure to be with you today. As we go through this material, you can email me if you have any questions. My email address is on the screen. However, to get a quicker answer, I encourage you to ask your tutor. In each presentation, I try to find actual news events from your country that pertain to our topic. After that, I will cover the critical issues of the chapter. The length of this presentation I estimate to be about 16 minutes from start to finish. Let's start with this headline. Photo exhibition gives highlight to indigenous cultures during Dalat Flower Festival. You can Google the headline if you want to read the article. What got my attention on this article is that Vietnam has an indigenous culture that this photographer is trying to share with other people. This chapter is about culture and how it affects international business. All countries have an indigenous culture. Even the United States. Our indigenous culture were the American Indians, who were there way before the European settlers arrived. Anyway, culture explains a lot of our values and why we do the things that we do. Culture is what makes a group of people unique. Culture explains why you make certain decisions. It explains what your values are. For example, Muslims believe different than Buddhists. Older people are more risk averse than younger people. Some cultures have a large family structure that includes grandparents, parents, and children, whereas other cultures believe in each generation's being separate. Occupations create different values as well. For example, people who live off the land, like farmers and fishermen, have a different perspective on living than do bankers and engineers. Consequently, our families and communities develop different customs. For example, the image on this slide shows drinking snake blood as a long-established custom. Drinking snake blood originated in China about 2,000 years ago as a curative medicine. Now, it's done throughout Central and Southeast Asia, more as a cultural ritual. I am told that there are snake restaurants on the outskirts of Hanoi, and I can't believe that Ho Chi Minh City doesn't have one as well. Let me introduce you to Dr. Gert Hofstede. He is the preeminent authority on how to measure the impact that culture has on business. He's about 90 years old and a former IBM engineer. He developed the 6 dimensions of culture. Let me read out loud the 2 comments that he made. Number 1, everybody speaks with an accent acquired when and where we grew up. Now, the key here is when I talk, you can hear my accent. You can tell I am different from someone who grew up in Vietnam. Number 2, less evident, everyone thinks, feels, and acts with an internal accent acquired when and where we grew up. Here's the point. What's important to me may not be important to you, and vice versa. With Dr. Hofstede's sixth dimension, you can probably estimate what's important to me and act accordingly. And I can do the same to you. One important note at this point. You will be writing a paper about selling a product to Turkey. These 6 dimensions will give you an idea of what's important to Turkish businessmen. I will cover this at the end of slide 8, and I would like to see your comment on this in your paper. Let's look at these 6 dimensions. The first dimension that some cultures would exhibit would be masculine versus feminine. Neither is right or wrong. A masculine value would be described as achievement, heroism, or being assertive. A feminine value is being modest, being cooperative, or seeking quality of life. Countries that exhibit masculine values are Japan, Germany, and the Middle East. Countries that exhibit feminine values are Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. Another dimension is adopting a long-term view as opposed to a short-term view. Think of it as future consumption versus immediate consumption. A description of a long-term view would include saving money and having a problem-solving mentality. Short-term descriptions would be following traditions, being a high spender, or a low saver. Countries that exhibit a long-term view are Vietnam, China, and Japan. Countries with a short-term view would be the Middle East and most Anglo countries. An Anglo country would be like Great Britain, United States, or Australia. The third dimension is indulgence versus restraint. Indulgence in a country would be measured by the level of freedom of speech, the amount and types of sports and leisure activities that people participate in. Restraint is measured by a high level of police presence, low levels of leisure allowed, and a limited amount of sports participation. Countries with high indulgence are your Anglo countries, Latin America, Middle and South Africa, and the Nordic countries. Countries with restraint would be Islamic and Eastern Europe. The fourth dimension is called the Power Distance Index. This refers to the degree of inequality that exists. Some cultures accept an unequal hierarchical distribution of power. For example, people respect their supervisors and children respect their elders. On the other hand, some cultures don't accept inequality. Symptoms would be loose family ties and powerful unions. Countries that accept inequality of power are Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Countries that promote equality are the Anglo and European countries. The fifth dimension is the individualism versus collectivism. Individualism refers to people who are independent, where privacy is important, and personal opinions are accepted. Collectivism indicates loyalty to the community, and people take responsibility for the well-being of others. You will find collectivist countries in Asia, Japan, and Latin America. Individualism is strong in the USA and Europe. The sixth dimension, the last dimension, is called uncertainty avoidance. It describes how well people cope with anxiety. Some cultures make life as predictable and controllable as possible. They like low risk. Low risk means low anxiety. People in these countries are more relaxed, open, and inclusive. Some countries accept risk as part of their lives. They don't do risky things, but they don't go out of their way to avoid it. Countries in Southern Europe prefer safety, while countries in Asia are risk takers. So how can you use this information? The Unit 2 essay is about selling products to Turkey. For the last two slides, we can determine that Turkey has masculine values, probably has a short-term view, a medium level of restraint, some equality and individualism, but avoids a high level of risk. You can go online and get specific recommendations as to which values might apply to Turkey. These values should shape your product offering that you present in your paper. Language is another facet of culture that is important. First, we have languages spoken at home, and then we have languages spoken in the workplace. Looking at the graph, you will see that Mandarin Chinese is the world's most spoken language at home. Almost 1 billion people speak Mandarin at home. Spanish and English both have about 400 million people who speak it at home. Languages spoken in the workplace represent a different cultural value. There are two reasons that English remains the largest business language. There are more commercial transactions that occur in English than any other language. Number two, most patents, copyrights, trademarks, and inventions are in English. Speaking English gives you a competitive advantage. Look at this headline. English speaking contest attracts over 180 students. One of the contestants provided a good explanation. Let me read it to you. English is not only a tool for communication, but also for cultural exchange and working in an international environment. So true. This slide describes how some international companies like to staff their businesses in each country that they're in. Now, the term polycentrism is the belief that a business in a country should be staffed by people from that country. This works well for restaurants, retail shops, factories where labor is the key production factor, and salespeople. Local business people know what and how to sell to their local buyers. Ethnocentrism is the belief that a business unit should be staffed by people from the country where the headquarters is located. This would work when they're selling prestige or expertise. For example, if you're selling an Airbus airplane, then a European salesperson might be a better person to have. Geocentrism is the belief that a business unit should be staffed with the most capable person available. This works best when expertise is needed. If you're building a bridge, you want the best bridge engineers on your staff, no matter what the nationality. The reason for listing this next topic, strategies for instituting change, is that companies may need to operate differently from other countries abroad. For example, if you're selling seafood to an Islamic country, you might find that they don't eat shellfish or shrimp. because of halal or religious food restrictions. There may be other ways around this predicament. All you have to do is study the situation and maybe empower one of these strategies for making change. This section on instituting change should be reviewed. The strategies could be used on both employees and customers. This chapter provides you a good overview of how culture affects international business. Next time, we start Chapter 3.